Welcome back to Varnadore Films. We have another edition of the college football games that made us this week. But this week I'm joined by a very special guest, my colleague at the Daily Stampede, Robert Steeg. Steeg, how are you doing tonight?
I'm gonna blush. You didn't have to be that nice on the intro. No, I'm doing good, Seth. It's the rain's letting up a little bit, so I'm finally able to relax and not worry about my power going out every 5 minutes.
Well, there you
Things
go.
are good over here.
That adds a layer of suspense to this recording.
If I just stop randomly, you know why.
It's like Hitchcock showing the bomb underneath the table right there. So everyone knows it's a possibility.
Oh, that's a reference that almost went over my head. Yeah. Almost.
So when I started thinking about doing this series, I reached out to a few people to see what they thought, and Steve was one of the first people that said, "Yeah, that sounds like fun. I could jump on there and talk about fun old college football games that we like." So Steeg's game is the 2008 Florida and Vanderbilt game. So this is just to set up the game, and then we'll get Steve's recollection of it, and then we'll watch some highlights, and then we'll talk about what made this game so special to him. But this is the first game for Florida coming off a victory against Georgia, that huge victory in 2008 where Urban Meyer took all the timeouts at the end of the game. And Florida was hoping to beat Vandy, win the SEC East, then go on to play Alabama, and hopefully a win against Alabama would keep their hopes for a national championship alive after the earlier loss to Ole Miss. Vanderbilt came into the game with the opportunity to actually also win the SEC East. They could have tied Florida with a win, and then they would have gone, I believe they would have won the tiebreaker and possibly gone on to play Alabama. So this was kind of an SEC East Division championship game. Vanderbilt came into the game allowing, I believe, only like 23 points a game or 24 points a game, something like that. So they had a pretty good defense coming into this week. Florida is coming off a 49-10 victory over arch rival Georgia, which is a game I'm sure they circled all off season long after the dance celebration in the previous game. So would this be a letdown? That's what some people were wondering. Steeg, it was not a letdown. It was a beatdown.
Not even close, really.
What do you remember from just the game itself?
Right. I mean, it was a very typical Tim Tebow-led Florida victory over an SEC East. I say vastly inferior, but at the time, Vanderbilt was quite a respectable SEC East team. And the SEC East at that time, it had talent kind of across the board, so you really could never count Vanderbilt as a circled victory every single time. But of course, Tim Tebow's, after his famous speech about the Ole Miss loss and how they would never do that again, boy, did they never let that happen again that year. I mean, every single opportunity that they had to put a game out of reach early and often, they took it. So definitely coming into that game, despite the fact that Vanderbilt being in, and I'm air quoting this, second place in the SEC East, you knew that Florida, one way or another, was going to try to just absolutely blow the doors off this one. Get the younger guys some playing time and really just kind of solidify it, rest your starters, make sure they don't get hurt or anything like that, and kind of move on from there. And growing up as a Florida fan, in the prime Tebow years, being at the time like 13 years old, I'm the kid sitting in there like with a Tebow jersey, hoping after the game he would sign it. And being that Tebow fanatic growing up, it was awesome to get every opportunity that you possibly can to watch history kind of unfold in front of you. At the time, I didn't know it was history. It's just 13-year-old me being like, "Yay, my team's winning!" And now here I am at 27 and saying, "Damn it, I just want my team to win one." So it's a nice little microcosm of it all. But it was just so much fun watching those Florida teams in that 2008 era. Just 2006 to 2008, just hard pressed good football all the way out throughout the entire game.
Yeah, and I believe after that loss to Ole Miss, they won every single game the rest of the year by double digits, including Alabama and Oklahoma to end the season. So they definitely kind of turned it on after that loss. But let's take a look at some highlights, and we can kind of see what you got to watch live here. And we'll kind of go through it. So we mentioned Vanderbilt came to the game only giving up 23 points a game. Florida would top that in almost the first quarter, easily in the first half. There's a Tim Tebow touchdown to Lewis Murphy. Run a little speed option here. Keeps it up inside. This was Tebow's, just doing research on the game, this was Tebow's highest rushing yardage of the season up to that point. He hadn't been running quite as much as he did the year before. You see the Florida defense there, bringing a blitz, causing some havoc. Ahmad Black with the interception. Gives a short field back to Tebow. And he's going to keep it again for another touchdown. This was a game that kind of vaulted him back into, I think a lot of people started thinking, okay, maybe a repeat Heisman here. Because he had some great games, but I think he started stacking like 5 touchdown performances. This one had 2 rushing touchdowns and 3 passing touchdowns. Steve, you pointed out when you were talking about the game, you said, I think they scored like 28 points and blocked a punt. Well, here's the blocked punt you were talking about. Again, as we spoke earlier, Vanderbilt was only giving up 23 points a game coming in here. Here's your boy Urban right there.
Oh, I love that guy. Love him. He's done so much good things for me.
Steve is also a big Jaguars fan.
Yeah, need to put that caveat on there.
So I think in this game, going back and watching, it looked like when Florida went empty, Vanderbilt tried to bring pressure, which didn't really work well. Here's a
when you had like 5, I think that entire offensive line at one point was an All-American, if I recall correctly. I mean that I know they all played in the NFL, and they all went to Pro Bowls and all that stuff. But I mean, that was probably one of the best offensive lines in like recent again. That's almost 20 years ago at this point. But in recent, yeah.
This is just kind of I thought this was a good microcosm of how the night went for Vanderbilt. You got a guy just like 3 guys getting on the quarterback. He evades it and then just gets smoked for his trouble and not converting a third down.
Who was Vanderbilt's quarterback that year?
They had a couple different. They played 2 different guys against Florida. I put this one here. I think Percy Harvin may have been the best player on the team. He was an unbelievable weapon. They used him in like a wildcat formation a few times in this game. He scores with it later. He also fumbled on the 1-yard line there. So Florida could have been worse than what it was. You see here with 10 seconds left in the half. This team was pretty loaded. Like we were talking about, I think almost every guy that started on the offense played in the NFL for a little bit. Probably similar on the defense, which I think is more commonplace now with how talent is concentrated on the best talent is kind of concentrated on fewer and fewer teams. It seems like every year. Here's a nice throw to Tebow to Redacted for a nice play at the goal line there. And then I think this is Percy. Harvin gets in for a touchdown. Puts Florida up 42-0. This is, with 9 minutes left in the third quarter. I think all Florida's offensive starters go out after this. Mm-hmm. And I think this is about the time you said you left the stadium as well, isn't it?
I mean, it's the typical, UF games in the mid 2000s like that, mid to late 2000s. Once Tebow went out, the stands kind of emptied a little bit, even on a road game like that. And I think Vanderbilt Stadium holds about like 40,000. It was probably like 31,000 UF fans. Like it was loaded orange and blue the entire way. So,
that's an interesting stadium there. I've been to a game there. What did you think about the stadium and kind of the setting around it? Do you remember
I loved it. I loved their stadium. And to this day, I have a real big affinity for Vanderbilt Stadium. And I know everyone shits on it because of the horseshoe shape with the empty end zone and what it looks like and everything like that. But it is novel nowadays to have a stadium set up in that way, just kind of for no reason, really. Like there's not a very good reason for them not to just go ahead and close that thing off at the very least. I'm pretty sure like down there in that end zone, in that empty end zone, that's for like the alumni like tailgates that they do, and they have like a VIP room and all that stuff. terrible fucking vantage points. Don't know why you would ever want to, sit there unless the food or drinks are that good. But they also don't really have like suites or boxes or anything like that. So I kind of get it. It's a very basic, old school stadium. It's very reminiscent of just, like I say, it's very reminiscent of the old timey like 1930s double wing T football, where you know Jim Bob McGee rushes for 235 yards and they lose 14-7. Like it's that kind of reminder. But yeah, I mean, probably the biggest draw of going to Vanderbilt games really is not just the uniqueness of that stadium, but that hotel that's right there has
I love a hotel next to a stadium. I've always, as someone growing up and still now, I'm always like, man, I could just get a room at that hotel and I could watch a game.
It's the most novel thing to be at a hotel, look down, towards the stadium, being able to watch a game, and I mean, realistically, like you don't really the way that Vanderbilt has, I think, a bar or restaurant set up there. I mean, you don't even need to stay at that hotel. You could just waltz right in and plant yourself by the window and watch some good old Vanderbilt Commodores football straight from there. So I mean, that's the biggest draw from that point of view is just to not be exposed to the elements for a rainy or cold night or anything like that. It just sipping a few cocktails and relaxing and enjoying some SEC football.
There you go. Florida ended up winning the game 42-14. Florida outgained Vanderbilt, I think, like 422 yards to 264 yards. So kind of Florida averaged 6.1 yards per rush, ran for 231 yards, passed for 203 yards. 9.1.
And I can tell you, most of those yards that Vanderbilt got came late in the fourth quarter because
they scored both their touchdowns after Florida kind of took their pupil out. So
right,
but this game wasn't wasn't your favorite or most memorable game just because it was a fun night in Nashville. Why is this kind of one of your favorites or one of the games that really made you kind of fall in love with college football?
Right. Yeah, and it's not the sexiest game on paper.
When you had asked that to me, I was like, "Are you sure? This is the one?"
Yeah, it's the one. No, and like Seth was saying, it's not the sexiest game on paper, and in fact, most of the game to me isn't actually very memorable. I obviously knowing the Florida roster growing up was one thing, but I couldn't tell you a damn thing about Vanderbilt's team. I don't know who was quarterback. Don't know who was coaching them. I just know they got barely bowl eligible that year, and it was a reputable Vanderbilt team instead of a pitiful one. But for me, at least, growing up as a Florida fan, in the early 2000s from Jacksonville, you go to games pretty frequently. My dad was the one that brought me to my first ever football game, Florida football game, technically first ever college football game, which was the Florida Western Kentucky game in 2006. So again, Barnes got thrown off the door. It was like 63-0 or something like that. But what it turned into was more of a family thing between my dad, my grandmother, and my grandfather. And so we would all go to games together, and we would mostly sit in the affectionately called redneck boxes. And so I think that's it. Yeah, the ones right above the gate. Yep.
We sat.
Oh yeah, they're incredible. But it's that's my grandfather went to UF, my dad went to UF as well. So they've been around for a long time. So that's where we always sat. And my grandmother and my grandfather would always travel to the UF away games as well. God bless my grandmother because she went to University of Miami.
Oh man!
Better yet, she was a majorette at the University of Miami. So full on, but kind of abandoned that for my grandfather. And unfortunately, in 2006, he passed away. Of course, traveling to a UF football game. They were going to Ole Miss, and unfortunately, he suffered a heart attack and passed away in the airport. So obviously, quite a devastating situation, and came as a shock to our entire family. And so grandmother, who went to all these Florida games, not really having anything except for my grandfather, kind of right there beside him. Understandably, didn't really go to UF games and didn't really go to away games or anything like that in 2007. And then finally kind of got the spur to come back and do more in 2008. And so that 2008 Florida Vanderbilt game was the first one that it was just my grandmother and I traveling together and just watching UF just absolutely beat the shit out of the team, which was probably the best way that it could have happened. We left the game about at halftime. Being native Floridians, gets quite cold in Nashville at that time. I think it was like down in like the 30s at the time. So we wanted to get out of the cold, get up into the hotel and watch the rest of the game from that bar restaurant that overlooks the stadium. And they gave us, bar was, slammed, crowded with UF fans, and some people graciously gave up their seats so that I could sit there right by the window and be able to watch the rest of the game from there. So it's definitely more of the sentimental side of why I fell in love with college football rather than, the excitement of the game. The game was, absolutely boring outside of, a couple Florida touchdowns, but it was definitely nice for my grandmother to just, take me along for the ride there, and ultimately her and I, got closer from there, continue to travel to more Florida games in the future. And she humors coming down to a few USF games, but I told her, I was like, it's too hot. The team's not good enough for you to muster down here at this point.
Maybe 2024.
Maybe
on track, I think.
Maybe we'll be 8-4 at that time. We'll keep doubling the wins.
I was kind of raised similarly. My grandfather went to Florida. My dad went there briefly before he went to school with my mom, so he left school. But it was a heirloom. The fandom or it was kind of an heirloom passed down generation to generation. And I think that's what's one of my favorite things about college football is a lot of times it's like, who do you root for? Well, I root for who my granddad rooted for, or my granddad went there. You see these things get passed down through the generations, and that's one of my. I think, and now that's not just exclusive to college football, but being from the South, and that's kind of NFL is popular, but college football is super popular down here.
Right.
So you kind of see that these fandoms get passed down through generations, through families. Like it's a big deal if you can take your kid to a game, or when your dad took you to your first game. Like I have over here, I showed it last week. I have the ticket for my first game. My dad took me 1993 against Vanderbilt. So
look at us.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. That is one of the things that I love about college football. You kind of share it. It's a little to me it's a little more communal than the NFL. So right. I think that is a beautiful and perfectly valid favorite game.
I'm glad, because again I really had to justify myself to everyone, because they're like they were when like, what kind of game is that?
Okay, let me look at the scores. Like, it wasn't a particularly close game.
Nope, just
I think that is 100%. I think if you ask most people, you're gonna get kind of two in. You're gonna get people that don't have that kind of in with a school. They don't have that kind of family tie or that emotional in, and it'll just be like the best game. But I think people that have that in are kind of raised, it's going to be a game like this.
Right.
So
I think first game, whatever it is, it's always important. That growing up and going, even if it was Florida State, Miami, whatever, Georgia Southern, Georgia Tech, whatever, it was important just to be able to kind of have the family around and go to things. And my mom never goes to football games, but stuck around, went to a few Florida games with my dad. Went to one like 5 years ago, noon kickoff. Like, Dad, pick a better time to bring your wife to that.
Yeah, he's really putting it on her right there. That's tough. So.
But yeah, no, I think those are the most important games. Everyone can talk about the overtime thrillers, the upsets, the big national championships, and everything like that. But the ones that are the most important games are the family and sentimental games like that.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. I think especially in college football, it's an heirloom. It's passed down for the most part. So thank you, Steve, for coming on. Excellent.
Appreciate you, Seth.
Excellent first guest. I will try
Yeah,
to
but
have
no,
some more guests on. I don't know if anybody's going to be able to clear the high bar that Steeg set today. But
I don't know about that one. I know that some people have got some more interesting football games to talk about. I mean, we could have probably just skipped completely over that game and just read Tebow's stat lines and got out of there. You already knew what was going
I
to
had to
happen
show
during
a
those
few
games.
highlights. You know, you got to keep the diehards happy here. But if anybody else wants to talk about their favorite game, I'm open to talking with anybody. I started with Steve because I knew he'd do a great job, and he had a good story here. But reach out to me on Twitter at Seth Varnadore. Steeg is at Robert Steeg Life. He wants to be on Survivor. So if you like this, use hashtag Steeg for Survivor and see if you can get him on there. He's ready. He's primed.
I'm ready to go. I don't know how I'm going to manage it being off social media for 30-something days and having to, force my lovely girlfriend to tweet for me. So we'll see how that goes if that happens. But
we'll get a grassroots campaign started here today. So we'll see what happens. All right, guys, thank you for watching. Again, if you want to talk about your favorite game, reach out to me on Twitter. You can direct message me, and we'll get you on here to talk about your favorite game. We'll give the same treatment, pull up some highlights, hear your recollection of it, and why it's so special to you. Like I said last week, college football is fun, and we should have fun talking about college football. And nothing's more fun to me than talking to people about their favorite games. So thanks for tuning in. Check back next week. We'll probably have another one.